Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another video. I hope you're all doing well and having a fantastic day. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. The last couple of weeks have been remarkably interesting within the cryptocurrency space. If you've been following along or watching the recent videos, thank you. For those checking the actual numbers, there was a filing deadline for companies and institutions involved in the cryptocurrency space, which revealed some intriguing details. First off, dozens of banks have been buying Bitcoin. We recently heard from the World Banking Committee that 19 central banks have also been purchasing Bitcoin, with allocations exceeding $10 billion. This is just the disclosed amount, as some banks chose not to respond. Additionally, several large banks across multiple countries, along with numerous family offices, have been investing in Bitcoin. Despite these significant buying numbers, the reaction from the market has been surprisingly muted. In previous years, such news would have caused a market frenzy. Now, it seems people are almost ignoring it, acting as if it's not significant. If we had heard in 2017, 2018, 2019, or even 2020 that these companies and corporations had bought any Bitcoin, the market reaction would have been vastly different. The price would have gone up. So, even upon hearing yesterday that 19 of the largest banks we know own over $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, there doesn't seem to be any kind of excitement. I think this ties into the fact that many people are only paying attention to Bitcoin's price. Anything else that happens doesn't seem very important to them. This website has strange formatting, and many sites haven't perfected their page layouts, which is why this one looks a bit off. Yesterday marked the deadline for investment firms managing over $100 million worth of Bitcoin through exchange-traded funds, ETFs, to disclose their holdings. The data shows that these newly launched ETF products are attracting significant interest from institutional players. Just 3 or 4 days ago, we learned that Bitcoin spot ETFs in the United States accumulated about 580,000 Bitcoins in 128 days. I don't understand how we're not over $150,000 per Bitcoin. To be completely honest, the math doesn't make sense. We hit $70,000 per Bitcoin a few years ago with far less interest and market movement. Back then, we only had news that institutions were thinking about entering the space. We didn't have a situation like in 2020 and 2021, where 9 companies purchased 500,000 Bitcoins in 128 days. I don't know what's wrong with the market or why this isn't more widely reported news. Despite receiving this kind of who's in the market news over the past 2 weeks, prices went down. Now, with all these filings, none of this information has made it into mainstream news. Not once has it become a widespread topic of discussion. Other YouTube channels are constantly fixated on charts and technical analysis, focusing on trends and patterns rather than real news. If more people spoke about actual developments and what's happening in the market, we would probably see a significant price increase. We should be seeing a significant price increase. It took 128 days to accumulate 580,000 Bitcoins, meaning that in another 128 days, those 9 companies will have over 1 million Bitcoins. How we're not over $150,000 per Bitcoin, I don't get it. This news also only covers companies that manage over $100 million. If a company is holding $36 million worth of Bitcoin, they didn't make this list. Even those with $99.9 million didn't make this list. I'm not sure if people are willingly ignoring this news or pretending it's not significant. It's similar to the news about Peter Schiff, a well-known Bitcoin critic. Recently, gold's price rose by $200 after a decade of stagnation, and Schiff was on multiple news stations claiming gold was outperforming Bitcoin. This is absurd since Bitcoin has increased by millions of percent since 2009, something gold will never achieve. Negative news seems to have a stronger impact on the cryptocurrency space than positive developments. Despite getting concrete numbers about institutional investments in Bitcoin daily due to disclosure obligations, the market remains relatively silent. It's puzzling, at least for me. According to data from Fintel, over 1,500 entities disclosed total ownership of around $10.6 billion in these ETFs. That's 1,500 companies, each with over $100 million worth of Bitcoin ETFs. This level of investment should be headline news, driving significant interest and price movement in the market, yet it isn't. This significant news did not make popular headlines. If even one company had such massive holdings, it would be major news. Recall when we heard that Fidelity and BlackRock had accumulated 457 bitcoins in one day, more than the amount mined daily, and that was reported as negative news. The priorities and understanding seem misaligned right now. Of the 10 spot Bitcoin ETFs, Grayscale, BlackRock, Fidelity, and ARK21 shares are the top choices for professional investors. Interestingly, despite Grayscale having the highest fees at 1.5%, all the banks are still buying from them. Hedge fund giant Millennium Management leads with $11.97 billion worth of Bitcoin ETF shares, according to a recent 13F filing with the U.S. SEC. Here's a tweet that highlights Millennium's dominance in Bitcoin ETF holdings, with about $2 billion across 4 ETFs. Out of over 500 holders, about 200 are new ETFs, with the majority being investment advisors, 60%, and a significant portion being hedge funds, 25%. The chart attached to the tweet shows extensive data, though the numbers are quite tiny and difficult to read. So, once again, we have another significant news day that the general public isn't paying attention to. Does anyone have an answer for why no one's paying attention? Why is it that everyone, except a few, seems to be ignoring these substantial developments? Have you been talking to your families about what's been going on? Have you been texting friends or family members, or discussing in person about all this Bitcoin accumulation? Do they know why institutions are accumulating Bitcoin, how fiat currencies are collapsing, and how the US dollar lost 99% of its value against Bitcoin in just 10 years? 10 years is a very short time frame for such a dramatic change. It feels like the news just isn't spreading effectively. When we get this news, we understand it and discuss it here, but it doesn't seem to reach a wider audience. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen daily reports of major banks, entities, and companies owning billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, but none of it has become popular news. Instead, what usually becomes popular are minor fluctuations in Bitcoin's price, like Bitcoin went up by 1% or Bitcoin went down by 2.1%, and speculative articles about various altcoins. People seem more interested in these momentary numbers rather than the significant, long-term accumulation of Bitcoin that's happening right in front of our eyes. Almost 600,000 Bitcoins were bought in just 128 days. Yet this massive accumulation isn't making headlines. This news should be huge, but it's being overlooked in favor of short-term price movements and chart analyses. I misspoke earlier. Let me correct that. The nearly 600,000 Bitcoin bought in 128 days is accurate, but my point remains. This kind of monumental news isn't getting the attention it deserves. The focus remains on minor, daily price changes rather than the broader, more impactful trends. That was for 9 of the Bitcoin ETF issuers. These 9 companies have accumulated 580,000 Bitcoins. The information I gave earlier was incorrect because I forgot about Grayscale, which holds around 300,000 Bitcoins. So the total is actually near 900,000 Bitcoins in 128 days. My mistake. When we were looking at the numbers on the screen, they were specifically for the other ETF issuers.